The storm hit without warning, transforming Viridian's crimson sky into a wall of swirling black clouds. Dax Voren cursed as he sprinted toward the abandoned research outpost, his scavenger's pack bouncing painfully against his spine. 3 years on this forsaken colony world had taught him to read the weather, but this tempest had outpaced even his practiced instincts. Lightning cracked across the alien landscape, illuminating the twisted metal structure ahead. Once a promising frontier science station, now just another failed human endeavor on a planet that seemed determined to reject them. The wind screamed between the corroded panels, carrying stinging particles of metallic dust that could strip flesh from bone if he remained exposed much longer. Dax shouldered his way through the partially collapsed entrance, the frame groaning in protest. Inside, he shook droplets of caustic rain from his protective gear, the liquid sizzling where it hit the floor. "Home, sweet home," he muttered, activating his portable heater as he surveyed the familiar ruins. He'd used this outpost as a way station before during his salvage hunts for abandoned technology. The faint scraping sound from the corner nearly stopped his heart. Dax's hand flew to his pulse rifle, years of survival instinct taking over before conscious thought. "Who's there?" His voice echoed in the cavernous chamber. "Show yourself nice and slow." Something shifted in the shadows, a form uncurling from behind a toppled console. Dax tightened his grip on the weapon, then froze as the figure emerged into the weak light of his lamp. She was unmistakably Verlathi, one of the indigenous species of Viridian, rarely seen by human colonists. Her skin was a pale lavender that seemed to shimmer with an internal luminescence. Large, multifaceted eyes regarded him with what he could only interpret as terror. She was soaked through, her membranous outer covering clinging to a frame that seemed painfully thin, even for her species. "Don't shoot," she said in halting standard. "Please." Dax lowered his weapon slowly, confusion replacing fear. The Verlathi were notoriously secretive, living in sealed underground communities far from human settlements. This one looked barely into adulthood by their standards. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, keeping his distance. "Nowhere else to go," she replied, her translator device crackling with static. "Exiled 3 cycles now." Thunder boomed outside, making her flinch. Dax noticed she was shivering violently, her lavender skin taking on a dangerous bluish tinge. Against his better judgment, he unslung his pack and pulled out his thermal blanket, his only spare. "Here," he said, holding it out. "You're half frozen." She stared at the offering, then at him, uncomprehending. Her translator sparked again. "Why would you?" "Because you need it more than I do right now," Dax replied simply. When she didn't move, he approached cautiously and draped the blanket around her shoulders. She tensed at his nearness, then relaxed as the blanket's heating elements activated, spreading warmth through her trembling form. Her eyes, all 6 of them, widened in what might have been gratitude. "I'm Dax," he said, stepping back to give her space. "Thella," she responded, clutching the blanket tighter. "My name is Thella." "Well, Thella, looks like we're both stuck here until this storm passes. Could be all night." He gestured to the portable heater. "I've got enough charge to keep us both from freezing, and some rations if you're hungry." She watched him warily, but the mention of food seemed to overcome her caution. "Thank you," she said. "It has been many days since I ate properly." As Dax set up a makeshift camp in the center of the room, he couldn't help stealing glances at his unexpected companion. There was something in her eyes, a depth of intelligence and emotion that transcended species barriers. It made him wonder what could drive someone like her into exile, alone in an environment hostile to her physiology. The storm raged outside, but in that moment, Dax felt a peculiar warmth that had nothing to do with his heater. For the first time in years, he wasn't facing the night alone. The storm showed no signs of relenting as night deepened on Viridian. Dax added the last of his fuel blocks to the portable heater, watching as Thella cautiously consumed a nutrient pack he'd offered. Her movements were precise, almost elegant despite her obvious exhaustion. "Your food is different," she said, examining the wrapper. "But good, thank you." Dax settled across from her, the heater casting dancing shadows across the abandoned outpost. "You speak our language well. Most Verlathi I've encountered barely acknowledge humans exist." Thella's multifaceted eyes reflected the heater's glow. "I was a communications specialist. My function was to study your kind." She hesitated. "That is partly why I am here now." "Exiled for talking to humans?" Dax raised an eyebrow. For suggesting we should. She pulled the thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders. My people believe isolation is safety. I argued that partnership could benefit both species on this difficult world. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. Dax had never heard a Verlathi speak so candidly. Most maintained their species' secrecy with religious devotion. How long have you been out here alone? He asked. 98 rotations, she replied. Nearly one full cycle of the third moon. Dax whistled low. That's a long time to survive the Viridian wilderness. I learned much from observing your kind. A different tone entered her voice, something almost like admiration. Humans are remarkably adaptable. You survive where logic says you should not. We're stubborn that way, Dax said with a half-smile. The colony nearly collapsed twice before we figured out how to grow crops in this soil. Thela leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your colony, your life there. Dax found himself describing Haven's settlement, the interconnected biodomes, the careful balance of resources, the community that had formed from the remains of a corporate mining expedition abandoned by Earth decades ago. He told her about his work as a salvager, recovering technology from failed outposts to keep the colony's systems running. And you, he asked eventually, what's it like living underground with your people? Thela's expression shifted, her features rearranging in what might have been nostalgia. Beautiful. Our cities are carved from living crystal. Light travels through pathways that sustain our crops. Everything connected, nothing wasted. Sounds more advanced than our haphazard setup, Dax observed. Different, she corrected. Your adaptability has value too. My people cannot conceive of changing ourselves to suit our environment. We can only change our environment or leave. The conversation flowed more easily as the night progressed. Dax shared stories of his scavenging expeditions, while Thela described Verlathi customs and beliefs. When she laughed at one of his jokes, a trilling sound unlike anything he'd heard before, Dax felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. As the hours passed, Thela's initial wariness gave way to curiosity. She asked questions about human emotions, relationships, customs that seemed foreign to her logical species. Your people form bonds without practical purpose, she said, her tone suggesting both confusion and fascination. You maintain relationships that offer no survival advantage. Dax chuckled. That's what makes us human, I suppose. We're not always practical. Is this why you helped me? She asked suddenly. An impractical choice. The question caught him off guard. I don't know, he admitted. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Thela was silent for a moment, her multifaceted eyes studying him with an intensity that made him strangely self-conscious. In my culture, she said softly, to share warmth is the deepest form of trust. Your blanket, she touched the thermal material. This would be a profound gesture among my kind. Dax felt his face grow warm. I didn't know. I believe you humans would call it kindness. She said the word carefully, as if testing an unfamiliar concept. It is something I have observed in your species but rarely experienced firsthand. Thunder crashed outside, making them both start. In that moment of shared surprise, Dax realized how comfortable he'd become in her presence, how easily they'd bridged the gap between their worlds in this small sanctuary they'd created. We should try to rest, he suggested, noticing her exhaustion. Storm might break by morning. Thela nodded, though she seemed reluctant to end their conversation. As she curled up near the heater, still wrapped in his blanket, Dax found himself wondering what would happen when morning came, and why the thought of parting ways left him feeling unexpectedly hollow. Dawn broke without the storm's permission, a faint crimson glow barely penetrating the churning clouds. Dax woke to the sound of labored breathing. Thela lay shivering violently near the now-cold heater, her lavender skin mottled with alarming patches of deep indigo. Thela, he scrambled to her side, alarm shooting through him. What's happening? Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Cold, seeping in, she managed between chattering teeth. My thermal regulation is failing. Dax cursed, fumbling with the heater controls. The power cell was depleted. Damn it! He placed a hand on her forehead, burning hot despite her shivering. Verlathi physiology, she whispered. Temperature drops trigger, defensive fever will pass or kill. Fear gripped him. The nearest medical facility was at Haven Settlement, A day's journey in good weather, impossible in this continuing storm. His limited knowledge of xenobiology offered little help. "What can I do?" he asked, desperate. "Tell me how to help you." "Body heat," she said weakly. "Your kind generates excess thermal energy." Understanding dawned. Without hesitation, Dax stretched out beside her on the cold floor, wrapping his arms around her trembling form. The fever radiating from her skin alarmed him, but he pulled her closer, covering them both with the thermal blanket. "Like this?" he asked softly. She nodded against his chest, her breathing gradually steadying. "The gesture means more in my culture," she murmured. "Forgive presumption." "Don't worry about that now," Dax said, surprising himself with how natural it felt to hold her. "Just focus on getting better." Time passed strangely as they lay entwined. Dax felt the gradual shift in her body temperature, the dangerous heat slowly subsiding to something more stable. Her alien physiology fascinated him. The way her skin seemed to absorb his body heat directly, the subtle shifting of color as her condition improved. "Better now," she said eventually, though she made no move to pull away. "Thank you." "You sure?" Dax asked, reluctant to break the connection between them. "You had me worried." She looked up at him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting his own image back at him. "You risked biohazard exposure. Why?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple words. Dax struggled to articulate the complex emotions swirling within him. "I've spent 3 years on this planet," he said slowly. "Scavenging, surviving, not much room for anything else." He met her gaze. "Until now, I didn't realize how lonely that's been." Her hand, 4 slender fingers with an almost silken texture, tentatively touched his face. "Loneliness, another concept my people deny experiencing." Her voice softened. "Yet I have felt it each day of my exile." The intimacy of the moment caught them both by surprise. Dax found himself drawn to her alien beauty, the luminescent quality of her skin, the grace of her movements, the intelligence behind her eyes. When their lips met, it was both strange and somehow perfectly natural. Her mouth was warmer than he expected, her taste faintly sweet like Viridian's mineral-rich water. The kiss deepened, curiosity giving way to genuine desire. "Is this allowed?" he whispered when they finally parted. "Nothing about me is allowed," she replied with unexpected humor. "I am already exiled. What further punishment could they devise?" "And you, do you want this?" Dax asked, suddenly uncertain. Thella's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "My research never prepared me for how physical connection affects emotional pathways. These feelings are overwhelming." "That's not an answer," he said gently. "Yes," she said simply. "I want this. I want to understand what it means to be close to someone who sees me as I am." Outside, the storm continued its assault on the landscape. But within their shelter, Dax and Thella discovered a different kind of tempest, one that blurred the boundaries between their species and opened possibilities neither had imagined before.